Christopher Lyle Johnston wrote, Pythagorean teachings envision a world order based on numerical ratios or propositions, reiterating an insight first hinted at by Anaximander and extended by Heraclitus, that the known or plan of the cosmos manifests a principle of proportion. Since numbers are real, we encounter for the first time the idea that the universal order grows out of existences that are accessible only to the mind. It's critical to understand this. A numerical universe means a mental universe. A material universe means a non-mental universe. The difference between a mathematical and scientific universe is the difference between a mental and a physical universe, between a universe of reason and a universe of the senses. If you need reason and logic to understand reality, it's a mental reality. If you need your senses to understand reality, it's a physical reality. But how can you understand anything with your senses? Animals have plenty of senses, but can't use reason and logic in any systematic way. How much knowledge and understanding of reality do animals have? None. A sensory worldview requires the universe to be made of stuff, mindless, lifeless, purposeless matter. That's the worldview of science. An emotional worldview requires the universe to be made of love, as in love and light ideology, or to be totally controlled by an unconditionally loving superbeing, as in Abrahamic faith in God, even though the Abrahamic God has any number of conditions attached to his love and seems, rather, to be a God of hate. Religions of faith are invariably emotional worldviews, based on having an emotional relationship with an anthropomorphic superbeing capable of loving humans. Would any person of faith worship a superbeing which had no human features and did not care at all about humans? Would people of faith worship a super extraterrestrial, or a supercomputer? Actually, some would. That's the kind of people they are. A mystical worldview requires the universe to be made of something mystical, such as bare awareness, cosmic consciousness or non-dualism, or to be controlled by a mystical being or process such as Brahman, or the Tao, or the One. A thinking worldview requires the world to be made of thought. That's exactly the case in ontological mathematics. Basis thoughts are sinusoidal waves, hence by the application of reason, logic and mathematics, the whole of reality can be worked out, thought thinking about thought, a thinking monism. No sensory experiments are required, no faith is required, no feeling is required, no mysticism is required. A thinking universe is a mental universe, a universe of living, striving, purposeful mind. The most amazing thing about thought is that it can solidify itself, externalize itself and project itself. When it does, it is none other than sensory matter, i.e., matter is not different from mind, from thought. It's just mind/thought expressing itself in a way that makes it sensory. Sensory, external thought seems different from non-sensory, internal thought, but it is in fact simply thought framed by the universal thoughts of space and time. Space and time are the framing thoughts for all externalized thoughts. Non-externalized thoughts are associated with a singularity, an immaterial, frequency entity outside space and time. The mathematical instrument that links frequencies, which is to say massless singularities, with spacetime matter, which has mass, is ontological Fourier mathematics. This is a complete, off-the-shelf solution for the famous interaction problem of Cartesian substance dualism, whereby extended, unthinking matter, on the spacetime side of things, is able to interact with unextended, thinking mind, on the frequency singularity side of things. It's all pure math. We alone have proved capable of identifying and understanding this. The whole of science and the whole of philosophy remains ignorant of this perfect solution and totally resistant to any such idea. Neither modern science nor modern philosophy has any interest in a precise, analytic, mathematical solution to existence. That means they don't want an answer at all. Mathematics is the sole subject which can define reality and render it knowable, explicable and intelligible. If reality is non-mathematical, then reality has no answer, but then how does mathematics exist at all in such a reality, an anti-mathematical reality? That's a category error right there. Mathematics in a non-mathematical reality is impossible, ergo, since mathematics does exist, reality is mathematical. This is the ontological argument. Mathematics is ontological because, if it weren't, it would be impossible for it to exist at all. It would be entirely incompatible with ontology and have no relevance at all to reality, hence would be in every way redundant and superfluous, and indeed impossible to formulate. By Occam's razor, the simplest explanation for why mathematics is essential to science is that mathematics is ontological and is anything other than an unreal, man-made abstraction, as science would have you believe. Christopher Lyle Johnston wrote, Pythagoras's teachings implied that the individual soul is continuous with the divine soul of the cosmos. In ontological mathematics, all minds are one at zero entropy, which is to say that all minds constitute God. God is a hive mind with two modes, 1, being total unity, and 2, becoming disunity, varying from total disunity to endless states of mixed unity and disunity, mixed states of cooperation and collectivism leading to unity and competition and individualism leading to disunity. The means of measuring the extent of unity or disunity is entropy. Zero entropy is total unity. Maximum entropy is total disunity. The hive mind is one at zero entropy, the God state, and, at maximum entropy, is in a state of universal civil war, the devil state. The hive mind is both God and the devil, and the extent of either divinity or Satanism is measured by entropy. Competition and individualism increase entropy and create violence and war. Satan is the ruling deity here, while cooperation and collectivism decrease entropy and create peace and harmony. God is the ruling deity here. Satan always wants to fight. God, in its pure state, never fights because there is no one to fight. In the God state, everyone forms a perfect unity. God, in its impure state, wants to overcome fighting, to end fighting. Only when fighting ceases can God be pure. Christopher Lyle Johnston wrote, according to the Pythagoreans, the breath or life of man and the breath or life of the infinite and divine universe were essentially the same. Men were many and divided, and were mortal. But the essential part of man, his soul, was not mortal, and owed its immortality to this fact, that it was a fragment or spark of the divine soul, cut off and imprisoned in a mortal body. Here, the idea is that when the soul belongs to God, it is divine. When it splits off from God, and becomes trapped in a body, it loses its divinity, and is then desperate to recover it. In truth, souls never leave the hive mind. What happens is that they collectively create a world full of bodies, and then they individually link to these bodies, while all the time themselves remaining in the singularity of mind. The relationship of mind to body isn't one of a mind moving in space and time to take up residence in a space-time body, until the death of the body, when the mind supposedly leaves the body and sets out on a new space-time journey, to purgatory, heaven or hell, which would then have to be part of the physical universe. Rather, the frequency mind mathematically links to the space-time body and interacts with it via forward and inverse Fourier transforms. This isn't a scientific universe of things, including minds, in space and time. It's a mathematical universe of frequency entities, minds in a mental frequency singularity outside space and time, interacting with material bodies in space and time. It's not something you can visualize with your senses, which is why science can't grasp it. It's a mathematical system, not scientific. Science accepts only the space-time domain. It rejects any suggestion of a singularity, a frequency domain of light, mind, which controls the space-time universe. Such a frequency domain is unobservable, hence excluded by science's defining method based on observation. Science does not have to use a method predicated on observation rather than logic and reason. It does so as an article of faith in its religion of empiricism. It explicitly rejects rationalism, by which the existence of the frequency domain is established. The scientific paradigm, based entirely on matter, space and time and the denial of the real existence of mind and the ontology of mathematics, is incapable of recognizing reality. It cannot fit the true way reality works into its paradigm because its paradigm literally excludes how reality works. The exclusion occurs in the first step of science's method, which concerns sensory observation. That's where science goes wrong. It goes wrong immediately, in the very way it decides how to interact with reality. It goes wrong in its implicit conception of reality as a material thing. It goes wrong in its basic philosophy of materialism and empiricism, and it has no way to challenge this error since neither its method nor paradigm contains any element that allows any challenge to its defining error. It is, to all intents and purposes, an unquestioning religious faith. Does anyone imagine that any scientist could ever respond to the contents of this book? They wouldn't have a clue. This is all of their worst nightmares come true. Science is an as-if subject. Its entire comprehension of reality operates as if only matter, space and time exist. Every other possibility is paradigmatically forbidden. A mathematical reality operating between a frequency singularity and a space-time projection from that singularity is impossible for scientists to imagine, even though it's literally a process demonstrated to us every time we dream. We can create material worlds at will in our own minds. Scientists don't want a mathematical reality of thought. They want a sensory reality of things. The fact that they are sensing types rather than thinking types destroys their intellect. They cannot conceive of reality being about reason and logic rather than stuff they look at it. They cannot escape from their personality type, from their mode of perception. They don't have the imagination, intuition or intellect. Scientists are incredibly far from being intellectuals. You will never grasp science if you fail to understand that. Science is a practical subject directed at physical objects in space and time. As soon as it's not dealing with physical objects in space and time, it's lost. It can't understand mind at all and ends up having to make the comical claim that the mind is a physical object in space and time, namely the physical brain. Science always has to claim that all phenomena are material and originate in matter. It has nowhere else to go. That's why it has to say that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of matter, or an emergent property of matter, or an illusion, or an unreality, or a fantasy, or something that will one day be shown to be a property of the organization of certain types of matter. The basic model used by science has never changed. It goes back to the ancient Greek atomists. It's the idea of a box that contains things, material atoms, which collide and interact. For the Greek atomists, there was no room for mind, except as a different kind of atom, smooth, round, rarefied soul atoms, which were actually fire atoms, fire, the supposed agent for heating the living body, being equated with the soul. Isaac Newton used this same basic model. So did Einstein, albeit with a more complicated version of the relationship between space and time than Newton imagined. Einstein believed in relativistic space and time as opposed to Newton's absolute space and time.